Gianna's hand trembled as she held the nebulizer against Leo's face for the third time that night. The wheeze in the boy's chest sounded like a rusty saw cutting through wet wood, and each forced breath tore a piece from her soul. 7 years old. Her son was only 7 years old and already knew more hospitals than playgrounds. Mr. Whiskers, their tabby cat, watched everything from the edge of the sofa with those yellow eyes full of feline judgment, as if saying, "Again, Gianna? Again, this desperation at 3 in the morning?" "Mummy, it hurts," Leo whispered, and it felt like someone had stuck a knife in Gianna's heart and twisted it slowly. "I know, love. I know." She kissed the boy's hot forehead, feeling the cold sweat that foreshadowed high fever. "We're going to hospital now, all right?" Nan Betty's already awake, and there was her grandmother, emerging from the narrow corridor of their Leeds Council flat in a flowered nightgown and slippers, her grey hair wild like cotton candy and her eyes still puffy with sleep. "Good Lord, child." Nan Betty made the sign of the cross 3 times in a row. "That chest wheezing would frighten a guard dog. Gianna, grab your bag. I'll say 3 Hail Marys and ask for protection. This outbreak's taking half the city to hospital." Outbreak, the word no one wanted to say, but that was on everyone's lips. 3 weeks ago, the first cases began. Children and young people with high fever, dry cough, shortness of breath. Schools sent warnings. Mothers created WhatsApp groups. The council issued technical notes full of fancy, empty words. But the hospitals? The hospitals were exploding. Gianna dressed Leo in grey joggers and an old Spider-Man top, his favorite, already faded from so much washing. She grabbed her bag, stuffed in his crumpled NHS card, the boy's documents, a water bottle, and 2 digestive biscuits left over from afternoon tea. Nan Betty, meanwhile, lit a candle to St. Joseph and murmured prayers that Gianna already knew by heart, but which still brought a strange comfort. As if God were more willing to listen when it came wrapped in badly pronounced Latin and the smell of melting paraffin. 15 minutes later, they were inside a taxi that smelled of cheap vanilla air freshener and old cigarettes. The driver, a man of about 60 with a Leeds United cap, looked in the rearview mirror and made a sympathetic tut. "Leeds General Infirmary, innit? It's mayhem there, love. Cue out the door. This outbreak's worse than EastEnders." "We don't have a choice," Gianna replied, pressing Leo against her chest. The boy was limp, hot, breathing too fast. When they arrived, the scene was exactly what the taxi driver had predicted. Organized hell. People everywhere, children crying, desperate mothers, nurses running from one side to the other like dizzy ants. The queue for pediatric appointments snaked through the corridor like a lazy, irritated snake. Gianna took her number, 243, and looked at the electronic display, 187. 56 people ahead of her. 2 hours of waiting at least. Maybe 3. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," grumbled Nan Betty, settling Leo in her lap. "I'll sit here with the lad. You go and have words with someone. I know you've got the mouth for it." And she did. Gianna Stevenson didn't back down easily. 32 years old, English literature teacher at a comprehensive where chalk was scarce, but creativity abundant, single mother since Leo's father decided that being a father was too much responsibility and disappeared like smoke. She had raised her son with Nan Betty's help, on a teacher's salary, which barely paid the rent, and with a stubbornness that would make a mule quit in shame. Gianna went to the reception desk, where a girl in her early 20s was typing something on the computer at the speed of a depressed tortoise. "Excuse me," Gianna said, trying to keep her voice firm. "My son's having real trouble breathing. Any way to move the appointment forward?" The girl didn't even look up from the screen. "Everyone here's having trouble breathing, love. It's the outbreak. You have to wait for your number to be called. But he's 7 years old. He's asthmatic. Everyone here has an urgent reason," the girl sighed, finally looking at Gianna with a mixture of exhaustion and irritation. "We're doing our best. Sit down and wait." Gianna felt the anger rise like bile in her throat. But before she could unleash the sharp tongue that Nan Betty always said would get her in trouble one day, a male voice intervened, calm and deep, like a cello playing at midnight. "Excuse me. Can I help?" Gianna turned and found herself face to face with a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a soap commercial. Tall, about 38, dark hair, slightly graying at the temples, honey-colored eyes that seemed lit from within. He wore a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, dark jeans, and pristine white trainers. He had a clipboard in his hand and an ID badge hanging round his neck, but Gianna was so irritated she didn't pay attention to what was written on it. "Unless you're Jesus Christ with the power to resurrect British bureaucracy, I doubt it," she retorted, crossing her arms. The man smiled, and what a smile. Disarming, one-sided, as if he were keeping an amusing secret. "Unfortunately, my powers are more limited, but perhaps I can speed things up a bit. What's your son's name?" "Leo. Leo Stevenson." "Why?" He noted something on the clipboard, then looked at the receptionist with an expression that, though gentle, had something of silent authority. "Emma, does young Leo have a history of asthma?" The girl finally seemed to wake up. "He does, doctor. It's in the system." Doctor, so he was a doctor, but why was he there in the middle of the chaos, helping with appointment bookings? Gianna frowned, suspicious. Well-educated and well-dressed people generally didn't mix with NHS chaos. There was something strange about this, but at that moment, with Leo wheezing like an old kettle in Nan Betty's lap, Gianna wasn't in a position to question miracles. "You can take him through to room 2. I'll do the triage," said the man, then turned to Gianna. "Bring him, let's see what's happening." Gianna blinked, confused. "Just like that? Without waiting? Just like that?" And that's how Gianna Stevenson, suspicious teacher and lioness mother, entered an improvised consultation room with her son in her arms and a stranger with honey-colored eyes who seemed too good to be true. Nan Betty came behind, dragging the large bag and making the sign of the cross again, as if entering a sacred temple. The consulting room was small, clean, with white walls and a poster of the respiratory system that looked like it had been printed in the 90s. The man, the doctor, indicated the examination couch. "You can put him here." Gianna obeyed, sitting Leo on the couch while the doctor washed his hands in a corner sink. He had precise, calm gestures, as if he'd done this millions of times. And he probably had. "Hello, Leo," he said, crouching to be at eye level with the boy. "I'm Dr. Miles." "You like Spider-Man?" Leo, who until then had been sulky and breathless, widened his eyes and nodded. "Me too," Miles continued, picking up the stethoscope. "But I always thought the best superhero is the one who breathes well. Because without air, nobody saves anybody, right? I'm going to listen to your little lungs, okay? It doesn't hurt at all." And so, with a mixture of kindness and competence that Gianna rarely saw in overworked NHS doctors, Miles examined Leo. He listened to his chest, his back, asked simple questions about the frequency of attacks, about medications, about family history. Nan Betty, sitting in a corner, watched everything with eagle eyes and a little smile in the corner of her mouth. That smile that Gianna knew well, and which meant, "Here's a good one, love, pay attention." "Auscultation shows diffuse wheezes," Miles said, more to himself than to Gianna. "Saturation is at 92, which isn't ideal. Ill-order nebulization here and then. We'll assess whether corticosteroid or admission is needed. But before that, I need you to tell me, has Leo had contact with other sick children?" Gianna sighed. "At school, probably. Half his class is off, and I work there. I'm a teacher. We're in the middle of the outbreak, aren't we? There's no escaping it." Miles nodded, thoughtful. "It's a seasonal respiratory virus, but this year it's particularly aggressive. And the hospitals, well, you've already seen. They're at breaking point." He paused, then looked directly at Gianna, and for the first time she noticed that his eyes didn't just have the color of honey. They also had a strange depth, as if they carried ancient weariness. "You did the right thing coming in. Asthmatic children need special attention in this kind of situation." "We didn't have a choice," Gianna replied, and hated how shaky her voice came out. I can't lose him." The words came out before she could hold them back, raw and desperate, and for a second, just 1 second, Miles seemed to see beyond the irritated and tired woman in front of him. He saw the terrified mother, the exhausted warrior, the woman who carried the world on her shoulders and pretended everything was fine. "You won't," he said, with a certainty so firm that Gianna almost believed it. "He'll take care of him." And in that moment, without either of them realizing, something tiny and invisible began to move between them, like a seed planted in fertile ground, watered by chance, desperation, and a strange feeling of familiarity. Gianna didn't know that this man was Miles Riley, owner of the most modern chain of private clinics in Yorkshire, millionaire businessman who appeared in business magazines and charity dinners. To her, he was just Dr. Miles. The man who had saved Leo from 3 hours of queuing. The man who crouched to a child's height and talked about superheroes who breathed well. And Miles? Miles didn't know he'd just met the woman who would turn his world upside down. The woman who would make him question everything, fortune, power, legacy. The woman who, with an asthmatic son, a devout grandmother, and a sharp tongue, would enter his life like a hurricane disguised as a breeze. But that, well, they would still discover. 3 days after the episode at hospital, Gianna still thought about Dr. Miles, and this irritated her deeply. She wasn't the type who fantasized about men, especially men she met in hospital corridors whilst her son struggled to breathe. But there was something about him. Perhaps it was the genuine kindness, rare as diamonds amidst the chaos of the health system. Perhaps it was the way he looked at Leo, without hurry, without condescension. Or perhaps it was just emotional exhaustion, creating fantasies in her tired mind. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" Nan Betty appeared in the kitchen doorway with a wooden spoon in hand and a mischievous smile. "About the handsome doctor." "Nan, for heaven's sake!" Gianna rolled her eyes, stirring the black coffee cooling in the mug. "I'm thinking about the bills, the rent, the school starting back. Everything except men." "Liar!" Nan Betty tapped her on the head with the wooden spoon. "I raised you, girl. I know when you've got that look of a love-struck Virginia Woolf." Virginia Woolf didn't fall for just anyone, Nan. But she did fall in love. Everyone does. Even me at 78 still sigh when I see Tom Jones on the telly. Gianna laughed, despite everything. Nan Betty had this gift, extracting laughs from her even on grey days. And that week had been particularly grey. Leo improved after the nebulization and medication prescribed by Miles. But the outbreak gave no respite. More children falling ill, more schools closing, more panic in the streets. And amidst it all, Gianna needed to think about how she was going to pay the electricity bill that arrived with interest, how she was going to buy the medicines Leo needed to take for the next 10 days, how she was going to make her salary, already meager, stretch to the end of the month. That's when her mobile vibrated on the table. A message from an unknown number. "Hi, Gianna. It's Dr. Miles. I got your contact from Leo's file. Hope you don't mind. How is he? Did the nebulization work?" Gianna blinked at the screen as if the phone had just announced the apocalypse. "Nan, he's messaged me." "Who?" Nan Betty dropped the spoon and came running, with the impressive agility of someone who swore they had arthritis, but forgot every time the gossip was good. "The doctor." "I knew it!" Betty clapped her hands. "I knew he fancied you. Men don't ask for file contacts for nothing, Gianna. That's interested man behavior. Or concerned doctor about his patient behavior, Nan. Don't get carried away. Concerned doctors ask at follow-up appointments. Interested men send WhatsApp messages at 9 on Sunday morning." Gianna looked at the clock. 9:12 on a Sunday. She bit her lip, not knowing what to reply. Would it be strange to show enthusiasm? Would it be rude to be short? She was so out of practice in interacting with men that she felt like a nervous teenager. Finally, she typed, "Hi, Dr. Miles. Thanks for asking. Leo's much better. The medication worked. And I don't mind about the contact. Thank you for helping us." 3 minutes later, "That's brilliant. I'm pleased. Look, I know this might seem odd, but do you have any free time this week? I'd like to grab a coffee and chat about the outbreak. I'm putting together a community prevention task force and thought that, as a teacher, you might have important insights. Gianna read the message twice, 3 times, 4. He's asking you out, Nan Betty announced, as if narrating the World Cup. He's asking me to talk about work, Nan. Gianna, love. Coffee is code. Coffee has always been code, since caveman times. Caveman called cavewoman to share berries, and that was already code for let's snog behind the rock. Gianna stifled a laugh. Nan, you're impossible. But deep down, a part of her, a small, careful, almost forgotten part, lit up like a timid candle in the dark. It had been so long since anyone had invited her to anything that didn't involve parents' evening or a collection for the summer fete. It had been so long since she'd felt seen as something beyond Leo's mum or Miss Stevenson. And there was a man, handsome, kind, smelling of possibilities, asking if she wanted coffee. She typed, "All right, I can do Wednesday afternoon after 3. Where? I know a nice place in the city centre. Cafe Bean there. He'll send you the location. See you Wednesday." And so, with a smiley emoji and a flutter of anxiety she hadn't felt in years, Gianna Stevenson accepted coffee with a man she thought was just a dedicated doctor. She had no idea that Miles Riley was the owner of a fortune built on private health clinics. She didn't know he lived in a house in the Yorkshire countryside that looked like it came from an interiors magazine. She didn't know he had an empire, powerful enemies, and a past that still haunted him in sleepless nights. And Miles also didn't know much. He didn't know that Gianna woke at 5 in the morning to prepare packed lunches and mark homework. He didn't know she saved pennies to buy second-hand books for Leo. He didn't know she carried on her back the weight of 1,000 responsibilities and still found space to laugh, to dream, to love with the intensity of someone who never stopped believing in happy endings. But he would discover, oh how he would. On Wednesday, Gianna was so nervous she changed clothes 4 times. She ended up with a simple white blouse, jeans and flat sandals. Nothing too fancy, but nothing scruffy either. She put on light pink lipstick, pulled her hair into a loose bun, and prayed that Nan Betty wouldn't make any embarrassing comments in front of Leo. "Mummy, you look pretty," said Leo, who was lying on the sofa watching cartoons. "Are you going out with the doctor?" "I'm having coffee, love. It's nothing special. The doctor's nice. He talked to me about Spider-Man." Gianna smiled, adjusting her son's fringe. "Yes, he is nice. If you two date, will he be my dad?" The question caught Gianna by surprise, like an invisible punch. She crouched in front of the boy, holding his little face between her hands. "Love, we're not dating. It's just coffee, and you already have everything you need. Me, Nan, Uncle James." "But it would be nice to have a dad," Leo said with that brutal honesty of children. "The boys at school have one." Gianna felt her chest tighten. She did her best. Worked, studied, bent over backwards, but she couldn't be 2 people at the same time. And no matter how hard she tried to compensate, there was a void there, a blank space she didn't know how to fill. "You're perfect just as you are, Leo, and I love you more than anything in this world." "I love you too, Mum." She kissed his forehead and left before the emotion overflowed. Cafe Bean. There was in a charming little street in Leeds city centre, between Victorian buildings and cobbled lanes. The smell of roasted coffee mixed with the aroma of chocolate invaded the entire street. Gianna arrived 5 minutes late, because the bus obviously decided to break down halfway, and found Miles sitting at a table near the window, leafing through a book. When he saw her, he stood up with a smile that made her stomach flip. "Hi, did you manage to get here all right?" "More or less. Public transport's an adventure." "I can imagine." He pulled out the chair for her, a gesture that Gianna found simultaneously sweet and old-fashioned. "I ordered a cappuccino for myself, but you can order whatever you like." She ordered a simple coffee and a piece of chocolate cake that looked indecent, it was so big. When the waitress brought everything, Miles looked at the cake with admiration. "That's cake or a monument?" Monument, Gianna replied, picking up a fork, and I'm going to eat it all without regret. They laughed, and that's how the conversation began. Miles talked about the task force he was putting together, about the need for educational campaigns in schools, about distributing masks and hand sanitizer to deprived communities. He spoke with passion, with technical knowledge, but also with an empathy that Gianna didn't expect. He seemed genuinely concerned about people's well-being, not just statistics. "And you?" he asked, leaning slightly over the table. "How is it at school? Are the children frightened?" "Very. Some children don't want to leave home. Some mums think it's mass hysteria. Some dads think it's government conspiracy. It's chaos." She took a sip of coffee. "But we do what we can. I did a lesson about respiratory hygiene using puppets. Seems daft, but it worked. The children loved it. Puppets." Miles smiled in that way again, that lopsided smile that seemed to carry secrets. "Tell me more." And she told him about the puppet Sneezy Pete, who learned to cough into his elbow, about Miss Flu, the villain who only lost when everyone washed their hands properly, about how the children left the lesson singing the little song she'd invented. "Wash, wash, wash them clean, soap between your fingers too, germs will flee the scene, and health will come to you." Miles laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a genuine guffaw, the kind that shakes the shoulders. "You're incredible." Gianna felt her face heat up. "It's just creativity and desperation, lots of desperation." "No, it's more than that. You transform pain into art, into solutions. That's rare." They were silent for a moment, looking at each other, and there, in that cafe, smelling of chocolate and memories, something began to take shape between them. Something still fragile, like blown glass, but beautiful, dangerously beautiful. That's when Miles' phone rang. He looked at the screen, and Gianna saw his expression change, a quick flash of tension. "Sorry, I need to take this." He left the cafe, and Gianna, alone with the rest of the cake, felt a pang of disappointment. But she also felt something else, curiosity. Who was this man, after all? Why did he have so much information about public health? Why did he talk about campaigns, as if he had the power to mobilize resources? There was something he wasn't saying, and Gianna Stevenson, teacher, mother, voracious reader of mysteries, decided she was going to find out. What she didn't know was that the truth was much bigger and more complicated than she could imagine. Miles Riley returned to the table with an expression that tried to be calm, but which Gianna recognized immediately. It was the face of someone who'd just received bad news and was pretending everything was fine. She knew that face. She'd worn it 1,000 times herself, when the electricity bill came more expensive than expected, when Leo's medicine went up in price, when the head teacher announced teacher cuts. "Everything all right?" she asked, leaning slightly over the table. Yes, just a complication at work." He forced a smile. "Nothing that can't wait." Lie. Gianna knew. But she wasn't going to push. It wasn't her business. Yet. They continued talking. About literature, about Leeds, about Roundhay Park that Miles recommended she visit, about the difference between Yorkshire tea and Southern tea. Miles was cultured, funny, interested. He asked real questions, not just to fill silence. And whenever she talked about Leo, which inevitably happened because Leo was an integral part of her life, he listened attentively, not with pity, not with the look that some people cast when they discovered she was a single mother. Just attention. When they left the cafe, the sun was already beginning to yellow the sky. Miles insisted on calling a car to take her home, but Gianna refused. "I'm taking the bus. I always have. You don't need to worry." "It's not worry. It's a courtesy," she laughed. "I know how to manage, Doctor." "Miles. You can just call me Miles." The name sounded strange in her mouth. Intimate. Dangerous. "All right. Miles." They said goodbye with a wave, and Gianna got on the packed bus with her heart racing and her mind still in the cafe. On the way back, she faced the fogged-up window and allowed herself just for a moment to imagine. Imagine a world where there was space for afternoon coffees, for conversations that didn't revolve around bills, for looks that said, I see you. But then an elderly lady sat next to her carrying 3 shopping bags, and reality came back with the smell of coriander and ripe tomatoes. When she got home, she found Nan Betty in the kitchen making Welsh cakes and Leo colouring a Spider-Man picture. "So, how was it?" Betty asked with that gleam in her eye. "It was good. Just good. Girl, you're redder than a pillar box. Confess." "Nan, it was coffee. We talked about work." "And when's he seeing you again?" "I don't know. We didn't arrange anything." "Well, you should. A good man's like a good bus, comes once and doesn't come back soon." Gianna rolled her eyes, but deep down she knew her grandmother was right. She picked Leo up, smelled the boy's hair, smell of children's shampoo and cartoons, and let the day flow. 2 days later, the bomb exploded. Gianna was at school, in the middle of a lesson on punctuation, when the head teacher entered the classroom with a pale face and a mobile in her hand. "Miss Stevenson, I need to speak with you, urgent." The tone of voice was the kind that announces tragedy. Gianna felt her stomach freeze. She immediately thought of Leo. "What happened? Is it my son?" No, it's complicated. Come with me." They went to the staff room, where there were already 3 other teachers gathered around a tablet. When Gianna approached, she saw the headlines splashed across the screen of a local news website. "Respiratory disease outbreak in Leeds. Riley Vital Clinic accused of negligence and overcharging during crisis." Her blood froze. Riley Vital. She read the text quickly, the words jumbling in front of her. Anonymous complaints, patients without care, suspected overcharging, investigation opened, and then, in the middle of the article, a photo. Miles. But it wasn't Dr. Miles. It was Dr. Miles Riley, CEO and owner of Riley Vital Network, one of the largest private health companies in Yorkshire. Gianna felt as if they'd pulled the ground from under her feet. "Do you know this bloke?" one of the teachers asked. Gianna couldn't answer. Her mind was in absolute chaos mode. Miles was rich? Like rich. Clinic owner? And why on earth hadn't he told her? Why pretend to be just an ordinary doctor helping at the NHS hospital? Why? Her mobile vibrated. "Message from Miles. Gianna, we need to talk. I know you must have seen the news. Please don't believe everything. Let me explain." She turned off the screen without replying. That night, Nan Betty prepared bean soup and watched Gianna push the food around her plate without eating. "Want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to talk about, Nan." "There is. You've got the face of someone who just discovered Father Christmas doesn't exist." Gianna put down her fork with a heavy sigh. "He deceived me." "Who?" "The doctor." "He's not just a doctor. He owns clinics. He's a millionaire. And he didn't tell me. He stayed there chatting to me about community task forces, pretending to be ordinary like us, when actually he probably has more money than he'll see in my entire life." Nan Betty chewed slowly, thoughtful. "And that changes what exactly?" "What do you mean changes what?" "It changes everything, Nan." "He lied." "Did he lie or just didn't tell?" Gianna opened her mouth to retort, but found no words. Technically, Miles had never said he was just a doctor. She'd assumed. He never talked about money, never showed off, never was arrogant. He just didn't correct her impression. But that was still lying, wasn't it? Lying by omission? "And if he'd told you straight away," Betty continued, with that irritating wisdom of someone who'd lived too long, "would you have treated him the same? Or would you have had your guard up, thinking he was doing charity, being condescending?" Gianna was silent, because deep down her grandmother was right. If she'd known from the start that Miles was a millionaire, she would have built walls. She would have seen in him a different world, inaccessible, unreachable. She would have put distance before even getting to know who he really was. But now she didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, curiosity, all mixed together like an emotional cocktail that gave a hangover before even drinking. The mobile rang again. Miles. Call. She answered, against all instincts screaming to ignore. "Hello? Gianna?" His voice was tense, tired. "Thank you for answering. I know you must be confused. I should have told you from the start. You really should have. Can I explain? In person. I think we've had enough coffee for 1 week. Please." And for the first time, she heard something in his voice that wasn't confidence or charm. It was vulnerability. I didn't lie about anything I feel or about who I am. I just omitted a part. And it was wrong. But let me explain why. Gianna closed her eyes, fighting against herself. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, round Hay Park. She almost laughed at the irony. And you're going to tell me everything? I will. I promise. She hung up before he could say anything else. Round Hay Park was exactly as Miles had described, beautiful, almost deserted, with ancient trees arching over the green lawns and the lake glistening under the afternoon sun. Gianna arrived in trainers, jean shorts and a loose top, feeling completely out of place. This place smelled of money, of people who didn't need to save for bus fares. Miles was already there, sitting on one of the benches by the lake, wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts. Next to him, a huge golden retriever, with golden fur shining in the sun, wagged its tail frantically. "This is Hippocrates," Miles said when she approached. "He's better mannered than me, should greet you first." And indeed, the dog came running towards Gianna, almost knocking her over with enthusiastic licks. She laughed despite the tension and scratched behind his ears. "Hello, Hippocrates. At least you're honest." Miles made a face. "I deserve that." "You do." They sat side by side on the grass, and for a few minutes just watched the ducks on the lake. It was Miles who broke the silence. "My father built Riley Vital Network 30 years ago. He was a doctor too, a surgeon. Started with a small clinic and kept growing. When I was a child, he lived at the hospital. I hardly saw him. And when I did, he was exhausted or anxious or arguing with my mum about money, politics, ethics. He wanted to help people. But the system swallows you, transforms you." Miles paused, collecting grass between his fingers. "He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. He was operating, collapsed right there at the operating table. And I inherited everything. The network, the legacy, the moral debts." Gianna looked at him sideways, seeing real pain stamped on his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because when I saw you in that hospital corridor, you didn't look at me as the clinic owner. You looked at me as a human being, someone who could help. And it had been so long since someone saw me like that. Not as the businessman, the millionaire, the Riley surname, just me." He turned to her, his honey-colored eyes laden with sincerity. "I should have told you. I know that. But I was scared. Scared you'd see me differently. Scared of losing the only genuine thing that's happened in my life in years." Gianna felt her chest tighten. She wanted to be angry, wanted to shout, accuse, build walls. But there was something in the way Miles spoke, in the way he looked at her, that disarmed all her defenses. "And the accusations?" she asked, her voice softer now. "The news talked about negligence." "Lies." Miles clenched his fists. "There's a man, Dr. Neville Morrison, my father's ex-partner. They fell out years ago over ethics. Neville wanted to cut costs, overcharge for procedures, exploit patients. My dad threw him out of the partnership. Since then, Neville has had a rival network and never forgave me for inheriting what he thought was partly his too. Hez behind these accusations, spread fake news, falsified reports, paid people to make anonymous complaints. Hez trying to destroy me. Can you prove that? My sister Julia's investigating. She's a journalist. She's going to expose everything. But meanwhile, my reputation's being shredded, and worst of all, it's affecting the outbreak prevention campaign. People are scared to come to our clinics. Children are going without care because of lies. Gianna absorbed all of this. Part of her was still hurt, but another part, the part that taught children to listen to both sides of the story before judging, knew he was being sincere. "Miles, I don't know what to do with all this. You live in a completely different world from mine. You have money, power, influence. I can barely pay rent. Leo needs medicine every month, and sometimes I have to choose between buying medicine or decent food. We're from different planets." "I know." He took her hand, a gentle, hesitant touch. "But I don't care about planets. I care about you, about the way you love Leo, about the way you teach using ridiculous puppets and songs that get stuck in your head, about the way you don't back down, even when the whole world seems to be against you. You're real, Gianna, and I'm tired of living in a world of appearances." Her eyes stung. Damn him. How dare he say exactly the right words? "I need time," she said finally, "to process all this. As much time as you need. It'll be here." They sat on the grass until the sun began to go down, painting the sky orange and pink. Hippocrates ran after ducks, and Gianna, for the first time in days, allowed herself to breathe. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that, at that exact moment, in a luxurious office in Manchester, Dr. Neville Morrison and Miriam Ashford were plotting their next move. And this time, they weren't just targeting Miles. They were targeting Gianna. The morning started strangely. Gianna woke with that uncomfortable feeling of when you dream you're falling and wake up before hitting the ground, heart racing, mind confused, body tense. She grabbed her mobile to check the time and saw 17 unread messages. 17. That was never a good sign. The first was from a teacher colleague. "Gianna, have you seen what they're saying about you on the internet?" The second from another friend. "I don't believe this. It has to be lies." The third from an unknown number. "Shame on you, gold digger." Her stomach plummeted. With trembling hands she opened the browser and typed her own name. What appeared was worse than any nightmare. There was an article on a sensationalist blog, one of those that mix gossip with news and call it journalism, with the title, "Comprehensive School Teacher Gets Involved with Health Millionaire Amid Scandal, Self-Interest or Love." And there were photos. Photos of her and Miles in the park. Photos taken from far away, with zoom, capturing moments that seemed much more intimate than they really were. Him holding her hand, her laughing, the two of them sitting together on the grass, the sunset in the background, as if it were the cover of a cheap romance novel. But it wasn't the photos that killed her. It was the text. Gianna Stevenson, 32, teacher at a comprehensive in Leeds, single mother, apparently found a quick solution to her financial problems. Businessman Miles Riley, owner of the Riley Vital Clinic network, currently under investigation for suspected negligence and overcharging during the respiratory disease outbreak. Sources close to the situation reveal that Gianna sought out Miles deliberately, taking her son for treatment at one of his units. Was it planned? The connection between the two occurs precisely when Riley faces his biggest image crisis. Coincidence or strategy? Gianna read and reread it, feeling anger grow like fire in her chest. Who had written this? Who took those photos? And why were they doing this to her? She ran downstairs, still in her pajamas, and found Nan Betty in the kitchen looking at the same news on her mobile, her face closed with indignation. "It's lies, Gianna. Everyone who knows you knows it's lies. But not everyone knows me, Nan." Gianna slammed her hand on the table, making the plates shake. "The whole internet's seeing this. My students will see it. My students' parents, the school board. I'm going to lose my job." "You won't lose anything. The truth always comes out." "Truth?" Gianna gave a bitter laugh. "Nan, truth doesn't matter when the lie is more interesting. Nobody wants to know that I'm just a teacher who met a nice bloke. They want to believe him a gold digger, an opportunist, that I used my sick son to get close to a millionaire. That's what gets clicks. That's what goes viral." Leo appeared in the doorway, still sleepy, holding his Spider-Man teddy. "Mum, why are you shouting?" Gianna closed her eyes, breathed deeply and crouched in front of her son. "Sorry, love. Mummy's just upset, but it's past." "Is it because of Dr. Miles?" How did he know? Children had radar. They picked up invisible tensions. "No, it's nothing. Go brush your teeth. Nan will make you hot chocolate." When Leo left, Gianna collapsed in the chair and buried her face in her hands. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Just anger, just the brutal feeling of injustice. The mobile rang. "Miles." She answered before even thinking. "Have you seen it?" he asked, his voice laden with guilt. "I've seen it. Gianna, I'm so sorry. This is Neville and Miriam's work. They're trying to destroy me using you. I should never have put you in this situation. Stop, Gianna interrupted him, her voice hard. It's not your fault, it's theirs. And I won't let them. I won't let them turn me into a victim or a villain. I won't stay quiet. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but it'll involve a solicitor, legal action, and lots of noise. I can help you. I have the best solicitors in the county. No! The word came out firmer than she expected. I don't want your financial help, Miles. If I accept, they'll say you're buying me, that you're supporting me, that I really am the gold digger they're painting. I need to do this my way. There was silence on the other end. You're incredible, he said finally. No, I'm just stubborn. But deep down, Gianna knew this was going to be harder than it seemed. How could she, with a teacher's salary and no political godfather, face a defamation machine run by powerful and unscrupulous people? The answer came in the form of an unexpected call 2 hours later. Hello, Gianna Stevenson? Yes? My name's Julia Riley. I'm Miley's sister and an investigative journalist. I need to talk to you. Julia was exactly the opposite of her brother. Where Miles was reserved and gentle, she was explosive and direct. Short black hair, red-framed glasses, ripped jeans, and a Frida Kahlo print top. They met in a discreet cafe, far from the city centre. Julia insisted for safety, and before even ordering anything, she threw a folder on the table. Everything you need is here: evidence, documents, emails. Miriam Ashford has a shell company that mass-produces fake content. She was paid by Neville to create fake profiles, spread rumors, and destroy the reputation of whoever he wants. She's done this before with other competitors, but this time she went too far. She put you in the middle. Gianna opened the folder, leafing through printouts of conversations, bank transfers, contracts. Everything there, everything documented. How did you get this? Julia smiled, a smile of someone who knows their own worth. I'm good at what I do. And I hate injustice. She leaned over the table. Look, Gianna, I don't know you, but my brother won't stop talking about you. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that Miles never falls in love easily. If he chose you, it's because you're special. And I won't let these worms destroy someone special. Gianna felt her eyes sting for the second time that day. What do I do with this? You authorize me to publish. I write the article, expose the whole scheme, show who's really behind this defamation campaign. And then, my dear, the internet will do what it does best, destroy the guilty. But what if they come after me? What if they get angrier? They will. Julia didn't lie. But would you rather be destroyed in silence or fight and have a chance of winning? Gianna didn't need to think long. Publish. The article came out 3 days later on the front page of one of Yorkshire's biggest news websites. The title was devastating. Corrupt businessman and associate run fake news scheme to destroy competitors and innocent people. And Julia didn't hold back. She exposed everything: the fake profiles, the shell companies, the bank transfers, the falsified reports, the names, Dr. Neville Morrison and Miriam Ashford. And at the end, she wrote a paragraph that Gianna read and reread until she memorized it. Gianna Stevenson is a teacher, mother, citizen, and above all, a human being. She didn't deserve to have her life exposed, distorted and destroyed by others' greed. None of us deserves this. And whilst there are people willing to lie, manipulate and destroy lives for money and power, well, keep fighting, because real journalism isn't about clicks, it's about truth. The repercussion was instantaneous. The article went viral. Hashtags were created. Justice for Gianna. Expose Neville. Social media turned against the real villains. Neville was summoned to testify. Miriam deleted all her social media and disappeared. And Gianna? Gianna finally cried, but not from sadness, from relief. That night, Miles appeared at her flat door, without warning, with Hippocrates on the lead, an improvised bouquet of flowers from the market, and an embarrassed smile. I know you said you didn't want my help, but I brought a dog. Do you like dogs? Leo, who opened the door, gave a shout of joy. Hippocrates! And there, in that small flat full of love, with Nan Betty laughing in the kitchen, Mr. Whiskers watching from the sofa with feline disdain, Leo hugging the golden retriever, and Miles holding wilted flowers with the most enamored expression Gianna had ever seen, she realized something. She was in love, completely, irremediably in love. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of it. The outbreak got worse before it got better. That was life's way of reminding everyone that tragedies don't respect developing romances. 3 weeks after exposing Neville and Miriam's scheme, Leeds hospitals were on the brink of collapse. Pediatric wards full, corridors turned into makeshift beds, doctors and nurses working 12, 14, 16-hour shifts. And then Leo got worse. It was in the early hours of a Thursday. Gianna woke to the sound no mother wants to hear. Her son trying to breathe and failing. She called Miles before even calling the ambulance, which in retrospect said a lot about how much he'd become an essential part of their lives. "Gianna?" His voice was sleepy, but quickly became alert. "What's happened?" "It's Leo. He can't breathe properly. I'm taking him to hospital, but—" "Miles, I'm scared." "Which hospital? I'll meet you there." "Leeds General." "No. Take him to Riley Vital Clinic, the Headingley unit. I'll ring the team now. There'll be a doctor waiting. There'll be a bed. There'll be everything he needs." Gianna hesitated for just a second. Pride, principles, none of that mattered when her son was struggling to breathe. "All right, I'm going." The taxi ride to the clinic was the longest of Gianna's life, even though it only lasted 10 minutes. Leo was in her lap, his breathing short and gasping, his lips slightly bluish. Nan Betty, beside her, prayed quietly whilst holding her grandson's hand. When they arrived, Miles was already at the door. He was no longer in sleeping clothes. He wore a white coat, serious, professional. He took Leo in his arms as if the boy weighed nothing and ran inside, shouting orders to the team. "Oxygen! Nebulization with salbutamol and ipratropium bromide. Prepare oximetry and chest X-ray, now!" Gianna ran after him, her heart beating so hard she could barely hear her own voice. "Will he be all right?" "Miles, tell me he'll be all right." Miles stopped for a second, turned to her and held her face between his hands. "He'll do everything, everything, Gianna. Trust me." And she trusted. The next hours were a blur of white lights, machines beeping, doctors coming in and out of the room where Leo was admitted. Miles didn't leave his side. He monitored every indicator, every medication, every change. And Gianna watched him be something she'd never seen before. Not Miles the businessman, not Miles the millionaire, but Miles the doctor, the dedicated professional who'd chosen to save lives. And he saved Leo. When the boy finally fell asleep, breathing better, with normalized saturation and a less pale face, Gianna crumbled. She left the room, went to the empty corridor, and let herself fall, sitting on the cold floor, her back against the wall, and cried. Cried with relief, exhaustion, retroactive fear. Miles sat beside her, on the floor too, not caring about the immaculate white coat. "He'll be fine," he said, his voice hoarse. "A few more days of observation, proper medication, and he can go home." "Thank you," Gianna whispered. "Thank you for saving my son." "You don't need to thank me. I do. You left everything to be here, in the middle of the night. For a boy who isn't even your son." Miles looked at her with that intensity that always disarmed her. "But he could be." The air left Gianna's lungs. "What?" "I'm in love with you, Gianna. Completely. From day one. From you shouting at me at the reception desk about British bureaucracy. From you eating that giant cake as if it were the last thing you'd eat in your life. From you defending your principles, even when it would be easier to accept help. You're the most incredible person I've ever met, and I want to be in your lives. Yours and Leo's. If you'll let me." Gianna didn't know what to say, because, frankly, how do you respond to a declaration like that in a hospital corridor at 4 a.m, with smudged mascara and a weary soul? You kiss the person. That's what you do. And that's what she did. It was a desperate kiss, wet with tears, full of raw emotion. It was a kiss that said, "I'm in love too," without needing words. It was a kiss that promised new beginnings, healing future. When they separated, Miles was smiling. So, is that a yes? It's a let's take it slowly because I have a son, a grandmother, a grumpy cat, and lots of insecurities. But yes, it's a yes. But, like every good story, there was still one last obstacle. 2 days later, whilst Leo was recovering well and was already playing in bed, to the despair of the nurses who tried to keep him still, the news exploded. A criminal fire at the community unit that Miles was about to open in one of Leeds' poorest areas. Police found traces of accelerant. It was deliberate. It was sabotage. And the main suspect? A former employee of Neville Morrison who'd been paid to destroy the project. Miles was devastated. Gianna found him in the clinic car park, sitting on the car bonnet, staring at nothing. "It was everything I wanted to do right," he said when she approached. "A proper community health project. Free care, pediatrics, GP, dentistry, everything people need and can't get. And they destroyed it, burnt it, as if those lives didn't matter." Gianna sat beside him. "Then rebuild. How?" The loss was enormous. The building was old, a restored Victorian house. Took months of renovation. And now, ashes. Then do it differently, better, bigger. She held his hand. "Miles, you have resources, you have knowledge, you have an incredible team. And now you have something you didn't have before, popular support. Since Julia exposed the scheme, the whole city's on your side. Do a crowdfunding campaign, call for volunteers. Involve the community. Show that no villain will stop you from doing good." He looked at her as if seeing the sun for the first time after years in darkness. "Do you really believe that? I believe in you." And that's how the rebuilding began. Not just of the building, but of something bigger. Julia published a moving article about the project and the attack. Donations started arriving. From local business people, from charities, from ordinary citizens who deposited £5, £10, £20. Gianna organised a working party with teachers and parents from school. Nan Betty led a charity bazaar that raised funds, selling cakes, sweets and crafts. And Miles worked like never before. Mornings at the clinic, afternoons at the building site, evenings planning the opening. He was exhausted, but he was also alive, more alive than he'd ever been. It was during one of those building afternoons that James, Gianna's brother, appeared. He was thin, with deep dark circles, and the expression of someone carrying an unbearable weight. "Gianna, I need to talk to you." They moved away from the group of volunteers. James was trembling. "I did something stupid, something really stupid." "What did you do?" I was doing deliveries for a company that paid well, really well. Medicines. I thought it was strange, but I needed the money, and then last week the police stopped me. The medicines were expired, Gianna. Fake. They were part of Neville's scheme. I was distributing poison without knowing. Gianna felt the world spin. "James, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But now the police are after me. I'm going to be arrested. And I can't handle prison, sis. I can't." He crumbled, and Gianna hugged him, even with anger, even with fear, because he was her brother, and siblings don't abandon each other. Miles, who'd been watching from afar, approached. "I can help." James looked up, suspicious. "Why? You don't even know me. But I know your sister, and if she loves you, you deserve a chance." Miles extended his hand. "Come with me. We'll give a statement. Well, explain you were used. And then, if you want, there's honest work waiting for you here on the project." James looked at the extended hand, then at Gianna, and finally took it. "Thank you." The opening of the new community clinic happened 2 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning. The rebuilt building was beautiful. White walls, large windows, flowery gardens, and at the entrance a plaque, Dr. Richard Riley Community Health Center, in memory of one who dedicated his life to saving lives. Miles was nervous. Gianna noticed in small gestures, the way he adjusted his tie, how he checked his watch every 5 minutes, how he forced smiles for people arriving. "Your dad would be proud," she said, intertwining her fingers with his. I hope so. I spent so long trying to prove I was different from him that I could do better. And in the end, I realized all I want is to honor his legacy, to do what he wanted but couldn't. You did it. Look around. Look how many people came. Look what you built. And it was true. Hundreds of people filled the garden. Families, children, elderly people, volunteers, journalists. Julia was there with her professional camera, recording everything. And Betty was handing out flapjacks to anyone who passed near her. Leo ran across the lawn with Hippocrates, both an explosion of energy and joy. And then came the surprise. During the opening speech, when Miles was thanking everyone, he stopped, breathed deeply, and called Gianna to the makeshift stage. "There's someone here who changed my life. She taught me that wealth isn't what you have in the bank. It's what you give. She showed me that courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. And she made me realize I didn't need grand gestures to be happy. I just needed her." He took a small box from his pocket and knelt. "Gianna Stevenson, will you marry me?" The world stopped. Gianna couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only see Miles there, kneeling, vulnerable, with honey-colored eyes shining with love. "Are you mad?" she said, and everyone laughed. "We've barely been together 6 months." "I know, but I also know I don't want another day without you, and if you want to wait, well, wait. If you want a long engagement, well, do it. But I need you to know I want you, forever." Leo shouted from the middle of the crowd, "Say yes, Mum! I want him to be my dad!" Nan Betty added, "If you say no, he'll marry him." And Gianna, with drenched eyes and a heart exploding with happiness, did the only sensible thing she could do. "Yes, yes, I do." The kiss that followed was accompanied by applause, shouts, whistles, and Hippocrates barking frantically. And in that moment, amidst the beautiful, noisy chaos, Gianna knew this was her family. Imperfect, crazy, unexpected, but hers. 2 months later, police finally arrested Dr. Neville Morrison. Evidence gathered by Julia was enough for conviction for fraud, document falsification, and arson. Miriam Ashford fled the country, but had an international arrest warrant issued. And the outbreak finally began to decrease. With vaccination campaigns, hygiene protocols in schools, and reinforced care in hospitals, including Miles' new community center, cases plummeted. Life returned to normal. Or rather, life found a new normal. Miles reduced his workload at private clinics to dedicate himself to the social project. He discovered that saving lives was much more rewarding when you saw the faces of the people you helped. Gianna remained a teacher. She refused offers to work in private schools or become Miles' educational consultant. She liked her children, her messy classrooms, her lessons with ridiculous puppets. James, after giving evidence and helping with the investigation, was acquitted and got a job at the community center as an administrative assistant. He still had nightmares about everything that happened, but was rebuilding his life, brick by brick. And Leo finally had the father he'd always dreamed of. Miles didn't replace anyone, because there was no one to replace, but he filled a space, and he did it with love, patience, and many, many conversations about superheroes. Epilogue. The wedding happened on the beach at Scarborough at sunset, exactly as Gianna had always dreamed, without knowing she dreamed it. It wasn't luxurious. It was intimate. 50 people, simple decoration, bare feet in the sand. Nan Betty cried during the entire ceremony. Julia was maid of honor and made a speech that mixed jokes, emotion, and veiled threats in case Miles made his sister-in-law unhappy. Leo was the page boy, proud in his little suit, carrying the rings with grown-up seriousness. Hippocrates and Mr. Whiskers, in a historic truce, shared the role of ceremony mascots. And when the registrar said, "You may kiss the bride," Miles held Gianna's face, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "I should thank you for saving Leo," she replied. "No, thank you for saving me from myself." And the kiss was long, deep, full of promises. 6 months later, they were all gathered in the new house, a modern build by the Yorkshire moors, with space for everyone. Gianna insisted that Nan Betty live with them. Miles not only agreed, but built an entire room just for her grandmother, with an adapted bathroom and moorland views. It was Sunday. Leo played in the garden with Hippocrates, trying to teach the dog to play football. Mr. Whiskers watched from the window, with his usual disdain. Nan Betty made Yorkshire puddings in the kitchen while singing an old Beatles song. Miles and Gianna were on the veranda, she reading a book, he working on the laptop planning the community centre expansion. "You know what's funny?" Gianna said, closing the book. "What? If you'd told me that first day at hospital that we'd be here today, I never would have believed it." "Me neither. But do you believe in fate?" Miles thought for a moment. "I think I believe in choices. We could have chosen to give up, could have let obstacles separate us, let the villains win, let fear take over. But we chose to fight, chose to trust, chose love." Gianna smiled. "You've become a poet. Your fault. You infected me with literature." She stood up, went to him and sat on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Miles Riley. I love you more, Gianna Riley." And so, with the sound of the wind across the moors, of Nan Betty's music, of Leo's laughter, they stayed there, an unlikely family, an impossible love that became inevitable. Because sometimes life writes better stories than any script. Sometimes a desperate mother takes her son to hospital and finds not just a doctor, but a future. And sometimes, just sometimes, happy endings happen, not because they're easy, but because they're chosen. So, did you enjoy this story? Were you moved along with Gianna and Miles? If the answer is yes, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit that notification bell. This way you'll be helping other people, just like you, to receive beautiful stories like this one. Because everyone deserves to believe in real love, in new beginnings, and in happy endings that are earned, not handed on a plate. Your participation makes all the difference. See you in the next story.